Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Well, that didn't take as long as I thought it would. I honestly didn't think we'd see an outcome to this case as quickly as we did, and that's mainly because of all the legal minds involved. But it appears that Alec Murdaugh, oh my hell with this Alec thing, his name is spelled Alex, but apparently when you're super rich and super douchey, the English alphabet, like vowels and consonants, they don't apply to you. So his name is pronounced Alec, even though it's spelled A-L-E-X, but whatever, I'm over it. Alec has been convicted, and today we are going to talk about how and why, and you might be surprised at some of the things I have to say. I'm also going to talk about our boy Buster, because something ain't right there. Buster's, he's Buster. There was a moment where I thought Alex was going to go free, and I'll tell you why. I covered this story way back in September of 2021, not too long after the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. If you haven't seen that episode, you may want to go and watch it first. I'm going to break this episode into parts because there are so many deaths surrounding this family. We're going to do kind of chapters. Buckle up, my friends, because it's time for part 2. This is the trial, evidence, and conviction of Alec Murdaugh. Let's get into it. Part 1, The Death of Stephen Smith, July 8, 2015. Stephen Smith was a 19-year-old college student studying at Orangeburg Calhoun Technical College in the nursing program. Stephen was a very popular young man in the Hampton County area. He had lots of friends, and those friends included Buster and Paul Murdaugh, as well as Paul's then-girlfriend, Morgan Doty. Stephen was openly gay, and in Hampton, South Carolina, sadly, that meant his life was not always easy. But Stephen wasn't someone who was going to let other people get him down. He was happy, he was fun to be around, and he was smart. He was very smart. In fact, Stephen used to tutor Buster Murdaugh when they were in high school together because he was so smart. Stephen was a very kind and nurturing person, and that's why he wanted to go into nursing. Those are the facts. Now we get into the gray area, which includes rumor and opinion. There began to be talk around town that Buster Murdaugh and Stephen Smith were more than friends. And again, in the Murdaugh world of South Carolina, that was scandalous. Neither the Murdaughs nor their peers would take kindly to talk of having a gay person in the family, because, bigotry. And so Buster started going out of his way to make sure people knew what he thought about Stephen. When speaking to Paul's girlfriend, Morgan, Buster used a disgusting slur when talking about Stephen, and Morgan recalls how shocked she was at the time. Then on July 8, 2015, Stephen Smith was found dead on a dark road, in the middle of that road, actually, in Hampton County. He had large gashes to his head, and his car was missing. The car was found about 3 miles down the road with the gas cap off. What I'm going to refer to today as the Murdaugh machine immediately went into action. No one really knows what happened between the time Stephen's body was found and the time his death was ruled a hit-and-run accident, but we know that SLED, which stands for South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, had conversations with Buster, Paul, and Alec Murdaugh. Absolutely no one really believes that Stephen Smith was killed in a hit and run. He didn't have the injuries that occur during a hit and run. He had intentional, deep injuries to his head, and most people believe he was beaten to death with something like a tire iron. But this is how powerful the Murdaugh family is. They were able to manipulate not only the police, but the judicial system in South Carolina. It's quite repulsive, despite the fact that multiple people came forward stating that Buster Murdaugh and Stephen may have been involved in a sexual relationship, and Buster didn't want anyone talking about that. Stephen Smith's death was quietly ruled a hit and run. He was buried, and his mother was left to grieve not only the loss of her son, but the injustice of his death. Members of the Hampton County media attempted to look into Stephen's death, but they were stonewalled at every turn. One reporter even claims that printing anything containing the Murdaugh name would result in immediate lawsuits against the newspaper. There were stories printed about Stephen's death, but reporters admit to kind of having to tiptoe around the possible Murdaugh involvement for fear of legal action by the Murdaugh family. So years went by and neither Stephen nor his family received any justice. But things appear to be changing on that front. Because of everything that has happened since Stephen's death, it appears his case is going to be reopened and his death is going to be properly investigated. So for now, we have to wait to see what the outcome of that investigation uncovers. Mike Hemlep, the attorney representing Stephen Smith's family, says that he is confident law enforcement is going to look into Stephen's death further, and I hope he's right. It only took the micro focus of the entire world to get that to happen. But it appears as though it is going to happen. Part 2, The Death of Gloria Satterfield, February 2nd, 2018. Gloria Satterfield was the housekeeper, cook, and nanny for the Murdaugh family. When this story first broke, Gloria was made out to be simply a house cleaner, but we now know directly from Paul's best friend and others close to the family that Gloria was much, much more. Gloria Satterfield was basically a mother to Paul. Maggie Murdaugh, the mother to Buster and Paul, wife to Alec, had a different relationship with Buster than she did with Paul. Let's just be blunt, she seemed to love Buster more or differently than she loved Paul. Buster was following in his father's footsteps. He wanted to be a lawyer. He was responsible and he was pretty good in school, and he was towing the Murdaugh line. Paul was a screw-up. He was also a teenaged alcoholic. Maggie didn't love Paul the way she loved Buster, and everybody knew it. Gloria Satterfield had a soft spot for Paul, as probably anyone would, seeing one child treated differently than the other. She cared for Paul, and Paul fiercely loved Gloria. One of Paul's friends said that Paul only had one photo in his wallet. It wasn't of his girlfriend or his family. It was of Gloria. They were very, very close, and Paul loved Gloria. On February 2nd, 2018, the Murdaugh groundskeeper was working outside on the ranch. Now, this ranch, this house where the Murdaugh family spent most of their time and lived, is a very large property. I read 1,800 acres, and it requires a full-time staff to keep it manicured and working. So on the morning of the 2nd, the groundskeeper is working outside when he suddenly hears Maggie Murdaugh screaming, "Come quick, Gloria has fallen and there's blood everywhere." The groundskeeper runs with Maggie to the front steps of the house, and Gloria Satterfield was laying on the brick steps. Her head was down below and her feet were elevated in the air on the steps above her. She was carrying a bag and a cup from McDonald's, which apparently she did every morning. The bag was beside her and the cup had spilled on the stairs. The groundskeeper and Maggie then picked Gloria up in order to get her off the steps and onto the flat ground. Emergency services arrived and Gloria was taken to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. The groundskeeper was then quietly kind of pushed out of the scene as law enforcement arrived, and the Murdaugh machine again went into action. Alec Murdaugh told the police that he had rushed home when he heard Gloria had fallen, and that as Gloria lay on the steps, she said to Alec, I fell down the stairs." The groundskeeper, who was actually there, he says that's a total lie. Alec Murdaugh was never at the house when Gloria was down. He wasn't even there when emergency services arrived. He wasn't even there when the police arrived. So how did his statement get into the police report? That statement claiming he was there and heard Gloria saying she fell down the stairs. Because the Murdaugh machine told the police to put that statement in the police report. And they did. Gloria's family was in shock at the unexpected death of the family matriarch. Alec Murdaugh stepped in, acting as the White Knight, saying he would pay for the funeral, and far beyond that, he was going to assist Gloria's family in a lawsuit against him so that his insurance company would pay a settlement to Gloria's family. He said the accident happened on his property and he was going to take full responsibility for it. At the funeral, Alec made sure to tell everyone that would listen that he was going to assist in that lawsuit against him so Gloria's family could be compensated. Ugh. I can't talk about my situation because I don't have permission to. My family went through something years ago. We've healed and recovered, but it took a long time. There are reasons that I'm involved in the true crime community. I can't talk about it. I think maybe someday in the future, after a little more healing, but the similarities of Alec Murdaugh to the person at the center of my situation, and a former family member who is now in prison, has been in prison for a long time. they are like the same person. Alec Murdaugh always wanted to come off like the good guy when he was, in fact, the very, very bad guy. And it hits really, really close to home for me. Gloria's family did file suit against Alec Murdaugh with Alec's help. The insurance company paid a settlement, and it wasn't $100,000. It was initially $7.5 million. Later, that award would be set by a court for $4.3 million, and Gloria's family never saw a nickel of that money, not a single red cent. So this is what a piece of shit Alec Murdaugh is. He didn't even give Gloria's sons maybe like $50,000 and then say the rest of it got burned up in attorney's fees. He didn't give them a penny. And now that big old ranch with all the cars and buggies and dogs and thousands of rifles, that all better be getting sold off and given to Gloria's sons, with some in reserve for the other victims that we'll be talking about today. But can you believe that? This greedy pig of a man didn't even give them a small percentage of that huge settlement, not $1. But Alec, he was very good at placating people. He told the boys that the money was coming, the settlement was coming, he was on their side, he was doing his best. So the boys didn't even know that there had been a settlement paid. Alec just kept stringing them along, telling them it was coming. By the time they found out the money had been paid and they hadn't received anything, things had gotten much, much more complicated. Part 3, the death of Mallory Beach, February 23rd, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, the now dead son of Alec Murdaugh. Where to begin? I want to preface this part of the episode by saying I know it's in bad taste to speak ill of the dead, and no one ever deserves to be murdered. I know this. I also know that being dead doesn't change who someone was or what they did. And Paul Murdaugh, at only 20 years old back in 2019, he had a lot of character struggles, I'll be nice. He was also raised by people who had a lot of character struggles. I'll keep it professional. But it's hard for me to hide my dislike of people like this, and so I'm just going to be honest about it. This is a kid that needed more love as a child and probably an ass whooping as an adult. Paul Murdaugh had a drinking problem. He drank often, and when he drank until he blacked out. All Paul's demons came to the surface when he was drinking, and he was a mean drunk. His personality changed so drastically when he was drinking that his friends named his alter ego, his drunk persona, Timmy. They said they had to come up with a name for the drunk persona because it wasn't Paul anymore. It was a different person. But no, it wasn't a different person. It was Paul. It was just the side of him that he was able to keep hidden when he was sober. Paul Murdaugh drank almost every day. His parents bought his alcohol. They drank with him, and he drank when they went out to dinner. My daughters get ID'd every single time they order a glass of wine at lunch or dinner. But apparently when you're a Murdaugh, you don't get ID'd. Apparently when you're a Murdaugh, you can do whatever you want. And I have no problem in saying shame on South Carolina and Hampton County for letting it get that far. We are all equal, and the rules and the laws apply to each and every one of us. And South Carolina, Hampton County, we see you and your disrespect for the law, and it's not a good look. Paul Murdaugh had a girlfriend, Morgan Doty, who, by the way, seems to me to be a very nice and genuine person, and I have no idea what she was doing with Paul Murdaugh. Morgan is from a working class family, and those people have more class in their little finger than the Murdaughs have in their whole line of lawbreakers. On the night of February 23rd, 2019, Paul and Morgan were headed to an oyster roast. Morgan was a part of a trio of best friends. They were 3 girls, named, of course, Morgan, a girl named Miley Altman, and a gal named Mallory Beach. Miley Altman's boyfriend was Connor Cook, and Mallory had recently begun dating her longtime best friend, Anthony Cook, who was also Connor Cook's cousin. Morgan, Miley, and Mallory, Connor and Anthony, were all very close. None of them really liked Paul Murdaugh, except Morgan, his girlfriend, but they accepted him into their group because he was dating their friend. Morgan wanted her 2 best friends, Miley and Mallory, to come to the oyster roast that night. So Miley and Connor said they would go, and then Mallory Beach talked her boyfriend Anthony, who didn't want to go, into going. This is the low country of South Carolina. It's marsh and low river country, and people use boats to get around. The group loaded onto Alec Murdaugh's boat, which Paul called his boat, and went to the oyster roast. On board with them was a cooler full of beer and White Claws. They went to the oyster roast, and it got cold, and everyone wanted to leave. Paul Murdaugh, as he usually was at any gathering, was drunk. Both Connor and Anthony tried to talk Paul into letting them drive the boat, but he wouldn't hear of it. Everyone wanted to go home, but Paul wanted to stop at a riverfront bar and get some more drinks. So because he was the driver, that's what they did. After midnight, the group ended up here at Luther's Well Done. In this surveillance footage, you can see the group walking up the dock to the bar. Mallory and Anthony stayed outside. Paul and Connor go in and they had some shots. Paul is so drunk he can barely stand up, but he still insists on driving. The girls thought for a moment about calling an Uber, and I don't need to pile on. I'm sure they wish they'd have made that decision every day of their lives. The group gets back on the boat to head home. While they're on the boat, they start arguing. Paul is driving like a maniac. He is going in circles and he is totally out of control. Morgan tries to get her boyfriend, Paul, to stop. And not only does he slap her across the face, he says to her, "You know what's embarrassing? That your dad can't make enough money to support your family." I'm going to try real hard to not say what I want to say here, because that is disgusting. Disgusting. And that really tells you who Paul Murdaugh was right there. As Paul is recklessly drunk driving this boat around 2:20 a.m., he drives it straight into a support pylon of the bridge on Paris Island. Everybody on the boat suffered injuries, but Mallory Beach was thrown from the boat in the crash. As soon as everyone got their wits about them, they called 911 and they started looking for Mallory. Now, the rest of this story could really be its own episode, but because we have so much to fit in today, I will just sum it up by saying Mallory Beach was not found for about a week. When her body was finally found, she had died from blunt force trauma to the head that resulted in drowning. There is a good chance she could have been saved had she been found, but she was not found and she drowned. Now, Paul's behavior after this crash is just appalling, but we don't have time today. Paul Murdaugh was eventually charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence, and he pled not guilty. At the time of Paul's murder, he had not yet been to trial. Around the time of the boat crash, Buster Murdaugh, Paul's older brother, was expelled from law school for cheating. He was thrown out of the University of South Carolina for plagiarism. Of course, the Murdaugh family hired an attorney for about $60,000, trying to get Buster readmitted, but he has never returned to school. So this boat crash was just another tragedy in the long line of deaths, scandals, and stressful events in the Murdaugh household. Mallory Beach will never receive justice for her death. Her family will never receive justice for her death. And Mallory is just one in a line of people unfortunate enough to come into contact with the Murdaugh family. Part 4, The Murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, June 7th, 2021. At noon on June 7th, Alec Murdaugh left his Moselle property and went to work at his law firm in Hampton. He got to work around 12:30 in the afternoon. At 3:28 that afternoon, Blanca Turrubiate-Simpson, who was working as the housekeeper for the Murdaughs, sent a text to Maggie Murdaugh saying, "Dinner's on the stove, just left." Maggie replied, "Thank you." At 3:41, Alec places a FaceTime call to Maggie and she doesn't answer. Just before 4 o'clock, Roger Dale Davis, a Murdaugh employee, goes to feed the dogs and the chickens, and he's planning to clean the dog pens. He was alone on the property at the time and didn't see anything out of place. At around 4 o'clock, Maggie texts the housekeeper, "I'm waiting at the doctor's office. Alec wants me to come home. I have to leave the door open at Edisto. I trust Mexicans to shut and lock the door for me. His dad," meaning Alec, "is back in the hospital. No cancer, it's pneumonia." Wow. I don't have a staff, but if I did, I would certainly know their names. I wouldn't refer to them as Mexicans. I'm sorry, I just cannot hide my bitchiness. That, to me, was kind of appalling. People have names. They have names. And yes, Alec's dad was in the hospital. He was 81 at the time and having some health problems. Later on in the story, he passes. At 3:57, Maggie texts Blanca again and says, "Alec is about to die. Hope he doesn't go down there to sleep. Alec needs to take care of himself as well." Now, I don't think this literally means Alec is about to die, just that he's not doing well, and that Maggie thinks he's going to see his father. Why is Alec not doing well? Because Alec is a drug addict. He's taking enough OxyContin every day to kill a horse. And he's been a drug addict for years, decades. Just after this text is sent, Alec texts Maggie and says, "How's your doctor appointment?" Maggie responds, "Waiting as usual." So these texts kind of about nothing go on for another 5 hours. They talk about getting a pedicure, Maggie calls one of her girlfriends, and then Paul records this Snapchat video of Alec and a broken tree and posts it at 7:40 that evening.
Better than it was, ain't it?
At 8:40 p.m., Paul calls his friend Rogan Gibson and asks him if there's something wrong with the tail of Rogan's dog who was staying at the Murdaugh kennels. Paul then shoots this Snapchat video of the dog's tail at 8:44 and sends it to his friend.
Get back! Get back! Quit, Cash. Come. Quit. It's okay. Come here. It's not that bad. Come here, Cash. Shit. Come here. Post it. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
Now, as you heard in that video, Paul, Maggie, and Alec can be heard in the background, and that's a big deal. At 8:49, Rogan texts Paul back and says, "See if you can get a good picture of it," meaning the dog's tail. "Marianne wants to send it to a girl we know that's a vet. Get the dog to sit and stay. He shouldn't move around too much." Paul Murdaugh never sees that text. Now, what we know from the positions of the phone and from the forensic evidence, at 8:50 p.m., Maggie Murdaugh is shot and killed near the dog kennels on the property. Paul Murdaugh is shot and killed nearby Maggie. Maggie is shot 5 times with an AR-15, and Paul is shot twice with a shotgun. 2 different guns were used. Now, if you don't have an iPhone and you don't know this, when your phone gets picked up and moves, anytime it tracks your steps, it's automatically built into the phone. 3 minutes later, someone picks up Maggie's phone and tries to unlock it, but the face recognition stops them. The phone then records 59 steps, meaning someone was carrying it. Alec Murdaugh's phone records him on the property walking 284 steps. Then at 9:04 p.m., he calls his wife's phone. Curiously, later on, only Maggie's phone records that call. There is no proof of that call from Alec's phone. 1 minute later, Alec calls his father, and that call lasts 18 seconds. Again, that call is recorded on Randolph Murdaugh's phone, but has been wiped from Alec's phone. Alec then leaves the ranch and texts Maggie's phone, "Going to check on M, be right back." Alec then calls Buster. That call lasts 60 seconds. That call is recorded by Buster's phone records, but again, it's not on Alec's phone. Guys, if you're going to try and wipe data from a phone, it doesn't work because then you have to wipe the data from everyone else's phone. It's pretty impossible. Alec then calls his longtime friend Chris. Chris is another attorney, but Chris says he's busy and he'll call Alec back. Alec then calls John Marvin Murdaugh, his brother, and again, that call appears on John Marvin's phone, but not on Alec's. Alec then goes to his mother's house. Alec's mother, Libby, has dementia, and her housekeeper tells Alec that she is asleep. So Alec leaves his mother's house and calls Paul's phone. Of course, there is no answer. Alec then gets a call back from his friend Chris, the attorney, and Alec tells him, "I'm almost home, and I'll call you back when I get there." At 10:06 p.m., after arriving at his Moselle property, after apparently frantically driving around trying to establish an alibi, Alec Murdaugh calls 911.
911, where's your emergency? This is Alec Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child just shot badly. Okay, you said 4147 Moselle Road in Arlington?
Sir?
You said 4147 Moselle Road in Arlington?
Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road.
Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay?
Conner County Communications.
Carlton, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay.
Alec continues on to tell dispatch that neither Maggie or Paul are breathing. He tells the dispatcher that he is not presently by the bodies and they tell him not to touch the bodies. He replies, "I already did. I rolled her over." He then hangs up, saying he has to call family members, and the police arrive at the murder scene.
Central 717 scene is secure. Got a Whiskey Fox, Whiskey Mike, both gunshot wounds to the head.
Sir, I want to let you know because of the scene, I did go get a gun and bring it down here.
It's in your vehicle? Do you have any guns on you at all?
No, sir. It's leaning up against the side of my car.
Okay. You're fine, man. You're fine. Turn around for me.
I don't have any guns.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see that. Okay. This is your wife and son?
And son.
Okay.
It's bad. It's bad. Check the pulses.
Yes, sir. This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I went and got. This is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
You know, he's been getting like punched. I know that's somebody. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did you get home? Right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital. Okay. I left. I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical guys that are. That's what they're gonna do. Okay.
What are they doing? Can they hurry?
They are. Yes, sir. That gentleman that was out here already. He's one of the battalion chiefs. Okay. How did you pull up? You from back there?
I went to the house and they weren't home, which was odd. I tried to call.
Okay.
And then I knew they had been down here before I left to go to my mom's.
Okay.
And so that is loaded.
Okay.
You might want to unload it. But I mean.
Is this the only firearm with you? This is the only one, or is there any more in the truck?
I believe that's it.
You think that's the only one? Okay.
I'm 99%.
Do you normally
certain
have any other firearms in your vehicle?
I don't, but occasionally occasionally there's a pistol in there.
Okay. Just wait right here for me for a second, okay?
Central House.
Copy.
Kill your front lights, I can't see.
That night, the scene is investigated and the investigation carries on for the next day. On June 10th, 2021, Alec gives an hour-long interview to investigators giving his version of what happened on the night of the murders. Immediately, things do not line up. Maggie and Paul are buried on June 11th, and then on June 17th, this now infamous interview airs on ABC, where Alec Murdaugh's brothers appear and plead with the public to come forward with any information on who killed Paul and Maggie. On June 23rd, SLED announces it is now looking into the death of Stephen Smith, and then they announce a $100,000 reward for anyone with information on the Murdaugh murders. Days later, an attorney representing the victims of the boat crash files a petition saying that Alec tried to shift the blame for the accident onto Connor Cook, telling people that Connor was actually driving the boat, not Paul. Alec is interviewed again in August of 2021, and he is caught lying over and over. Over the next few weeks, Alec Murdaugh begins to lose support. People had been dealing with concerns and questions regarding Alec for a while, and now they knew this man was lying about a lot of things. On September 4th, Alec's closest friend, this Chris Watson, who's an attorney, the same one he called on the night of the murders, confronts Alec after finding out that Alec had been stealing money from him. Alec and Chris had worked some cases together, and apparently Alec had swindled his best friend by not paying him the proceeds from the cases they worked together. During this confrontation, Alec tells his friend that he is sorry and that he has been secretly dealing with an opioid addiction for 20 years. This addiction wasn't a secret. Even Paul's girlfriend knew about it, and I'm pretty sure plenty of other people did too. But this confrontation seems to have pushed Alec over the edge. He's lost the support of many people, and now his best friend has caught him lying and stealing from him. Alec Murdaugh is a desperate man, and desperate times call for desperate measures. Part 5, the shooting of Alec Murdaugh, September 4th, 2021. A call comes into 911 dispatch. On the line is Alec Murdaugh, and he tells the dispatch officer that while changing a tire on the side of the road, a man stopped to help him, but instead, the man shot him in the head.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
On Salkehatchie Road.
Okay, what's the address on Salkehatchie Road?
I'm by the church.
What church? What church are you talking about?
I don't know the name of it with the red roof.
Okay, what end of Salkehatchie Road? Because I don't know what you're talking about.
At the Hampton County side.
Okay, what's going on?
I got a flat tire,
Mm-hmm.
and I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me, and when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me.
Oh, okay. Were you shot?
Yes, but
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay.
You shot where? Where were you shot at?
Huh?
Did they actually shoot you or they tried to shoot you?
They shot me, but,
Okay, wait, you need EMS?
well, I mean, yes, I can't drive.
Okay.
I'm trouble seeing, and I'm bleeding a lot.
Where part of your body?
I'm not sure. Somewhere on my head.
Your head?
Somewhere on my head. Somebody just stopped for me, ma'am. For 911.
Okay. Still?
Hey.
Okay, let me speak to him, see if he can tell me exactly where you are.
Alec is taken for medical treatment. Of course, this news spreads like wildfire. I'm sure many of you remember. We were all kind of stunned, thinking, wait a minute, his wife and son are murdered, and now he's shot in the head? Oh, but wait, he wasn't actually shot in the head. It was barely a grazing wound. He wasn't actually shot. The whole thing just smelled suspicious from the jump. As if we weren't all shocked enough by this event, 2 days later, on September 6th, Alec Murdaugh releases a statement saying that he is resigning from his law firm and entering rehab for opioid addiction. The truth of the matter is, Alec Murdaugh did not resign. He was fired. He was kicked out. A representative from his law firm announces that Alec had been stealing money from the firm for a very long time. The prince of this legal dynasty had been officially thrown off the throne. He was out of the family and out of the dynasty, and for the first time, the Murdaughs begin to believe they just might not get away with it this time. Things then begin to happen very quickly. On September 7th, a search warrant was issued for this man, Curtis Edward Smith, who turns out to be basically Alec's drug dealer. He is the man that Alec claims shot him, grazed him. But Curtis has a different story. Curtis tells authorities that Alec hired him to shoot at him, and then it comes out that Alec lured Curtis to the roadside, saying he needed help with a flat tire, and Alec was most likely planning on killing Curtis, and then saying Curtis was the one who killed Maggie and Paul, and was trying to kill Alec as well, so Alec had to kill Curtis in self-defense. It's a lot. It's a lot. I know, it's a lot. Investigators believe what happened was that Curtis got away from Alec, and Alec was injured in the confrontation. When this scheme went up in smoke and Curtis escaped from Alec, things were really looking bad for poor Alec Murdaugh, but they got worse. The next day, September 8th, the South Carolina Supreme Court suspends Alec Murdaugh's law license, and it is later revoked. Alec's attorneys tried to spin the story of this shooting, but days later, on September 12th, he finally comes clean and admits to his son Buster and to his brothers that he was, quote, trying to kill himself so Buster could get his $10 million life insurance policy. The day after that, SLED announces a criminal investigation into the theft of funds from the law firm. Curtis Smith was arrested 2 days later for his part in the roadside scheme. On September 16th, Alec Murdaugh turns himself into the authorities at the Hampton County Detention Center. He is given a $20,000 bond for insurance fraud on the roadside shooting scheme and is ordered to appear back in court on October 25th. But before that can happen, Alec is taken into custody on October 14th for lying to an insurance company about Gloria Satterfield's death. He's taken back into court on October 19th, and a judge orders Alec held pending a psychiatric evaluation. From here on out, it's just a domino of bad events for Alec. A judge freezes his assets, Mallory Beach's family files a lawsuit, Connor Cook files a lawsuit, and then both Alec and Curtis Edward Smith are indicted on multiple charges for the roadside insurance scheme. Alec Murdaugh is then denied bond on November 10th, which shocked everyone. This would be like a very powerful senator or congressman going to jail and not getting bond. Those types of people always get preferential treatment, but it had all come to an end. On November 19th, Alec was indicted on 30 criminal counts stemming from the wrongful distribution of Gloria Satterfield's settlement. Then Anthony Cook, Mallory Beach's boyfriend, files a lawsuit against Alec for allowing his son to drive the boat while underage and intoxicated. New charges are then filed against Alec involving Gloria's death. Other attorneys come forward and claim Alec had stolen money from their firms and their clients as well. One of Alec's friends, a man named Cory Fleming, then has his law license suspended for helping Alec in his schemes. Alec is again indicted on January 21st, 2022 for computer crimes and breach of trust. Morgan Doty, Paul's girlfriend, then files a lawsuit against the Murdaugh estate. That happens in February of 2022. The Moselle property goes up for sale about the same time Cory Fleming, Alec's friend, gets indicted. By June of 2022, still no arrests had been made in the murders of Maggie and Paul. That same month, Alec Murdaugh was disbarred permanently. He's had his law license stripped. Finally, on July 14th, 2022, Alec Murdaugh is indicted on 2 counts of murder for killing his wife and his son. No one is surprised at that point. Alec appears in court on July 20th and pleads not guilty. And then it all culminates in the trial of Alec Murdaugh, which begins on January 25th, 2023, just a couple of months ago. The trial is all captured on video, and the nation and the world watched as Alec Murdaugh cried and slobbered and shook through the witness testimony. At the beginning of this episode, I told you that you might be surprised by a couple of things I have to say. I'm going to be honest with you, there was a couple of days where I did not know if he was going to be convicted. I even talked with my father about it. If you're new here, my father was an attorney for decades. He even served as county prosecutor, and then he was appointed to be a judge and served as a judge for over 20 years. So we like to talk about things like this sometimes. We both felt like the prosecution may not have made their case. And part of that is because there wasn't a great deal of forensic evidence. Juries now really want forensic evidence, and it really wasn't there. There are very specific rules that juries have to follow regarding proof of guilt, and there were a couple of days during the trial where I was a little nervous. But then the Snapchat video was played in court when everyone heard Alec Murdaugh's voice on that Snapchat video. He was caught in a lie. He had always said that he wasn't even at the house until after the murder, and everyone could clearly hear that that wasn't the case. Then the housekeeper testified. We don't have time to go into everything she said, but she was a really good witness and kind of nailed Alec's coffin shut. Even Alec's attorney, lifelong friend Chris, testified that he was 100% sure that it was Alec's voice on the Snapchat video. It was more than enough for the jury. On Friday, March 3rd, just a couple of weeks ago, Alec Murdaugh was sentenced to life in prison for the murders of his wife Maggie and his own son Paul. No one was surprised, but we were all sickened at the thought of a man killing his own son. Sadly, we see spousal murder quite often, but your own son. Now, this might sound like the end, but I don't know. I just have this gut feeling that this is not the end. Of course, there's all kinds of litigation hanging out there surrounding the boat accident and Stephen Smith and Gloria Satterfield, but that's not really what I mean. How do I say this? First off, I'm not 100% sure that it wasn't Maggie who pushed Gloria down the stairs. The townspeople who knew her called her Maggie Murder instead of Maggie Murdaugh because there was a rumor that she had done it. Some people say that's ridiculous, but that rumor is out there. But I want to talk about Buster. I posted a poll on my YouTube and on my TikTok page asking if Alec is covering for Buster, at least on the death of Stephen Smith. And as you can see here, 62% of my TikTok audience believes that to be the case. There have also been a lot of recorded phone calls coming from prison between Alec and Buster. Buster has been seen partying and gambling in Las Vegas, even as his father sits in prison. And then there's this moment in the trial where Buster is caught smirking during a very serious moment. There is something up with Buster. I don't know if he's just a smug, rich kid or if it's more than that, but I just have this feeling that this isn't the end. In fact, if they don't have Alec Murdaugh on suicide watch, I feel like that's a mistake. I personally believe he could very well be in that state of mind and may try something. But for now, you are up to date on this epic case. There will probably be a part 3. Who knows? Maybe we'll have to do a part 4. There are still plenty of charges pending for Mallory Beach, for Stephen Smith, and for the victims of the countless lawsuits Alec Murdaugh swindled out of their settlements. There is much more to come on this story, this Southern Gothic tale of a legal dynasty in shambles, of a family who lived a life of luxury at the expense of others and who got away with breaking the law for a very long time. They even got away with murder for a while, but it looks like their time is up. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. You know the drill. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. And if you really want to support me, you can join my Patreon. You'll get some bonus content, you'll help support the channel, and in the end, the goal is to donate money to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that cannot be tested because there is no money to test it. We want to help with that. And if you join my Patreon, you can be a part of it. Thank you for spending a little of your day with me. I sure appreciate it. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.